I'm Diane Ruiz for People Power Media. Today I'm speaking with the president of the NGO, the National Alliance for Filipino Concerns, NAFCON. Terry Valen is joining us from San Francisco. NAFCON is a national alliance for Filipino-American organizations and people that serve to protect the rights and welfare of Filipinos. NAFCON is currently raising funds for disaster relief in the wake of the devastating typhoon that struck the central islands of the Philippines last Friday. Upwards of 10,000 people are feared dead as the storm tore through the country, leaving behind millions of people who are homeless and in desperate need of water, food, medicine, and other relief supplies. Thank you for joining us, Terry.
Thank you for having us.
What have you been hearing is the situation on the ground?
Yeah, our partner organizations, again, we're working with schools, churches, NGOs, and grassroots people's organizations in the Philippines through BALSA, which stands for Bayanihan Alay sa Sambayanan. It means raft in Tagalog, and also with the National Council of Churches in the Philippines. And these are folks who've been living and working in the communities most affected, hardest hit, and in some of the hardest to reach areas. What they're telling us is the level of devastation is unprecedented in the Philippines, where whole towns and villages are wiped out, and a lot of infrastructure destroyed by the storm surges and the strong winds. Again, that are the largest typhoon in recorded history is swept through the central Visayas Islands, and particularly in the eastern Visayan Islands, Samar, Leyte, Panay Island, others. They've suffered a level of devastation that's unprecedented, and it's really hard to get into those areas right now, but people are doing their best, especially with the local community groups that have been there for a long time.
What can you tell us about the relief efforts? Has the desperation increased, or is relief beginning to get to the typhoon victims?
Yeah, that's what, a lot of people, even, larger organizations are saying it's logistically hard to get into the central Visayas Islands right now. So we have been in touch with folks who are setting up distribution points of both relief aid and relief workers from the nearer areas. And these are, again, through BALSA, they've been able to connect with some of the local communities, and from particularly Cebu and Bicol, which are relatively okay. They've set up distribution points to get into the hardest hit areas, the islands of Leyte and Samar. These are some of the poorest regions of the Philippines. I think that's some of the third poorest provinces in the Philippines. And when the typhoon swept through the middle of the Visayan Islands, about 4 million people were affected, is what they're saying. And that's in 36 different provinces in the central Philippines. They're trying to get in there. Transportation is very difficult. But again, it's folks on the ground who've been living and working around those areas who know best how to navigate the terrain and go from island to island to bring immediate relief and rehabilitation to some of these areas.
There's a lot of people who want to help the victims of this devastation, but there's also a lot of confusion about where to give. Why should people trust NAFCON with their donation?
We've been working here for almost 10 years now as a national alliance, with over 2 or 3 dozen organizations in 23 different cities here in the United States that are working with the Filipino community here. But our partners in the Philippines, the National Council of Churches in the Philippines and BALSA, includes schools, churches, NGOs, health workers, and others who have been living and working in these communities on the ground for years, even before the typhoon. And so, our efforts have gone really directly to those grassroots communities and people that know the conditions on the ground and are able to provide 100% of our donations directly to the communities and victims of the typhoon. So, a lot of folks are wondering, should I donate to the government or to the Red Cross or to other international aid agencies? And they're really looking for those grassroots efforts that would make sure that 100% of the donations are going directly to the communities and victims. And that's why an outpouring of support has come through NAFCONUSA.org. And we want to continue that effort. We've had a lot of success over the recent years through the several typhoons that have happened recently, and we want to continue that effort.
So along those lines, this isn't the first time that NAFCON has helped with relief efforts for natural disasters in the Philippines. Can you tell us about your past experience?
Right, so the NAFCON has had a Bayanihan relief and rehabilitation campaign for several years. It really ramped up in 2009 with Typhoon Ondoy that passed through the Philippines then. And, we had sent a cargo container full of goods that logistically was difficult through customs and a cargo shipment. but raises over $100,000 over past relief efforts, and have made sure those go, again, directly to community groups and organizations working on the ground in the Philippines. And they send us direct reports of exactly what those funds are used for, how it impacts the local communities, and accountability for all of the donations. So we put an example of that up on our website, NAFCONUSA.org, that shows also Mindanao, with Typhoon Pablo that passed in 2012, a full account of the impacts of our relief efforts there. And also, back in 2009, when we facilitated the donation of $50,000 from the city of San Francisco, we made sure it went to a grassroots partner there who did a water filtration project, did disaster preparedness workshops, and actually empowered community folks to be health workers in their local community so that they could build a community pharmacy. All of those things are documented with that $50,000 donation as examples of how the work really goes directly to the communities there, and none of it is being pocketed, for instance, by politicians or going to administrative costs of relief agencies. So this is what folks are really looking for, and they don't have to be confused about where our donations are going. It's going really directly to the people and communities through a grassroots effort.
What are NAFCON's efforts in the U.S., and how are people supporting this?
Yeah, right now it's been overwhelming, the level of support, not just from Filipinos and Filipino-Americans here in the U.S., but from all communities here in the United States. So we've coordinated a national effort, initially spearheaded by NAFCON, but with also other national alliances like Bayan USA and Gabriela USA. We're forming right now a Task Force Haiyan nationally and in local chapters across the country. And this allows people to coordinate their efforts with a task force that's actually making sure that it's as grassroots as possible. So what people are organizing right now, for instance, are fundraisers. People with restaurants, people who are like concert promoters are wanting to do events and activities with us in particular to make sure that those funds raised actually go, again, to grassroots groups in the Philippines. Another big project that we're working on with nurses unions across the country is sending medical missions directly to the Philippines. I think in their call out for nurses, medical professionals who would be willing to go to the Philippines, almost 400 within a matter of hours to go on medical missions. So we're coordinating that with, there's actually a global Nurses United group where in the Philippines, the Alliance for Health Workers is going to be hosting medical missions from our efforts here in the United States to bring medical personnel directly to these areas. And again, these coordinated efforts where people with whatever skills they have are really adding up to a large people-to-people, again, community-to-community grassroots effort.
Break down for us how the donation gets from the U.S. to the staff on the ground in the Philippines and the typhoon victims.
So our online donations through NAFCONUSA.org, and then checks that people write in particular, those are being coursed through a partner in Southern California, the St. George Fontana Church, which has a lot of Filipino members, has been working with grassroots Filipino groups in the Southern California, San Bernardino area. And through that church, we're coursing our donations to the Philippines and our grassroots partners there. BALSA and also the National Council of Churches in the Philippines will be able to receive those donations directly. Again, 100% of it going to the efforts across the Central Visayas area and, going to those areas that are most in need. So, again, it's NGOs, people's organizations, schools and churches, and health workers who are going to be on the ground in the communities in the Visayas area.
Tell us about some of the personal experiences that you and your staff have with relatives who are in the impacted areas.
Me personally, I've got relatives in the Cebu area. My family's from there, my mom's family, originally from Tacloban City, actually, which was overwhelmed and devastated. But they're in Cebu now, in northern Cebu, and they said they're okay there, a family there so far. I've been able to reach them through Facebook, luckily. But our community members we have in the San Francisco Bay Area have already lost loved ones.
Thank you for sharing with us, Terry, and our thoughts and prayers go out to your relatives and those of your staff and others who are helping with this effort.
Thank you, Diane and Joseph, and Beautiful Power Media. All of this has been huge. We've been getting a lot of outpouring of support, and it is because of media efforts like yours to get the word out there. Appreciate the support.
This is Diane Ruiz for People, Power Media.